Let's talk about Antarctica. It's the coldest, driest, and most remote continent on the entire planet, a place so extreme it's practically another world. And because it's so mysterious, it's become a breeding ground for some truly wild theories. But what if the real secrets of Antarctica are even stranger than the myths? Let's dig in. So here's the question that kicks everything off. Why is Antarctica so restricted? You can't just book a flight and wander around. That one fact has launched 1,000 conspiracy theories. Are the world's governments hiding something big down there? To figure it out, we've got to go back to the very beginning. For most of human history, Antarctica wasn't just forbidden, it was a ghost, a phantom, a giant blank space at the bottom of the map where anything seemed possible, a place for our imaginations to just run wild. Way back in the day, the ancient Greeks, guys like Ptolemy, came up with this idea they called terra australis incognita, the unknown southern land. Their logic was actually pretty cool. It was all about balance. They figured that for the Earth to be stable, there had to be a huge continent in the south to even out all the land they knew about in the north. It wasn't based on discovery, just this beautiful idea of perfect scientific symmetry. So this idea of a southern continent kept explorers searching for centuries. But the real mystery, the thing that gets conspiracy theorists really excited, starts when we look at the maps they left behind. Maps that seem to show things that are totally impossible. Okay, let's start with the most famous one of all, the Peary Race map from 1513. The big claim here is that it shows the coast of Antarctica mapped with incredible detail. But, and here's the kicker, without its miles-thick ice sheet. If that's true, it would mean some ancient, super advanced civilization had to have mapped it thousands of years ago. It sounds pretty amazing, right? But, the reality is probably a little more down to earth. Experts who've actually studied the map and even read Peary Rees's own notes have a different take. They're pretty sure it's not Antarctica at all, but a stretched-out, distorted drawing of the South American coast. Back then, if you didn't know where a coastline ended, you'd often just keep drawing. It was a common mistake. So, case closed? Well, not so fast, because just a few years later, this map shows up, and the continent it shows at the South Pole looks eerily similar to the actual landmass of Antarctica underneath all that ice, a shape we didn't even know existed until we used modern radar in the 1990s. Now, that is much harder to just brush off as a simple mistake. And it's maps exactly like this one that lead us away from just talking about cartography and straight into the mind-blowing idea of a lost civilization, a world that existed before the ice. This brings us to a historian named Charles Hapgood. In the 1950s, he looked at these old maps and cooked up a truly radical theory. He called it Earth crust displacement, and the idea was that the entire outer crust of the planet could have slipped all at once in some catastrophic event. Hapgood's whole scenario sounds like a Hollywood blockbuster. He claimed by 12,000 years ago, Antarctica was actually warm and located somewhere else, and it was home to the legendary city of Atlantis. Then, some cataclysm happened, the planet's crust shifted, and the entire continent was violently shoved to the South Pole, where it flash froze, perfectly preserving whatever was there under miles of ice. Now, the scientific community at the time thought this was just complete nonsense. I mean, how could a whole continent just slide across the planet? But here's the truly wild part. At that exact same time, they were also calling the theory of continental drift nonsense, an idea that we now know is a fundamental fact of geology. And this is just a brilliant lesson, isn't it? It shows how what seems like crazy pseudoscience today can sometimes hold a piece of the truth that becomes the accepted science of tomorrow. It doesn't mean Hapgood was right about Atlantis, but it's a pretty powerful reminder to always question what we think we know for sure. All right, fast forward to the 20th century, the myths about Antarctica don't just fade away. Oh no, they get supercharged with new villains and new technologies. We're talking secret Nazi bases and full-on alien encounters. This timeline really shows you how things ramped up. First, the American explorer Admiral Byrd sets up a base. Then, just before World War II, the Nazis show up. Right after the war, the U.S. launches a massive military operation. And then, boom, all of a sudden, everyone agrees to lock the whole continent down with a treaty. You can see how that sequence of events is the perfect fuel for a good conspiracy theory. So, the myth about the Nazi expedition is that they were there looking for ancient artifacts or building secret underground bases, but the reality, according to historical records, was a lot more practical. Germany needed oil, specifically whale oil. It was a key ingredient for making things like nitroglycerin for bombs and margarine for food. And Antarctica was the best whaling spot in the world. But the biggest, most popular legend of all has to be Operation High Jump. This was a huge post-war American naval operation with thousands of troops. The official story was that they were just testing equipment in cold weather. The conspiracy theory? That Admiral Byrd found an entrance to a hollow Earth, met an advanced underground civilization, and maybe even got into a dogfight with flying saucers. So where did these incredible stories even come from? Well, the answer is kind of disappointing. Forgeries. Decades later, a couple of authors published what they claimed were Admiral Byrd's secret diaries, trying to sell books. But Byrd's own family and his actual real logs prove these were total fakes. There's not a single credible piece of evidence to back up any of those wild claims. So if it's not Nazis, aliens, or a hollow Earth, then what are the real secrets of Antarctica? Why is it so protected? Well, the truth is less about what's hidden under the ice and more about what's happening at the negotiating table. This treaty right here is the real reason it's all locked down. In 1959, at the peak of the Cold War, 12 nations, including arch rivals, the US and the Soviet Union, signed this amazing treaty. They all agreed to set the continent aside for peaceful science, banning any military activity and, this is the crucial part, putting a freeze on all claims to its resources. And why was that so important? This number tells you everything you need to know. 50 billion barrels of oil. And that's just an estimate for one single region of Antarctica. That's not even counting the untold trillions in minerals and other resources. Without that treaty, the continent would have been the next great battlefield. The treaty isn't hiding a secret. It's preventing a war. So what about all those weird satellite images you see online? You know, the pyramids and crashed spaceships. Well, pretty much all of them have simple, natural explanations. Those perfect pyramids, they're just mountain peaks that have been carved into sharp points by glaciers. That crashed UFO, it's literally just a big rock that slid down a hill. And those tunnels, natural ice caves. So we've kind of peeled back all these layers of myth. The secrets of Antarctica aren't what the conspiracies claim they are. The continent is protected not to hide aliens, but to stop us humans from fighting over its resources. But that does not mean there isn't a really profound mystery left. See, science tells us Hapgood got his timing wrong. Antarctica wasn't warm 12,000 years ago. The last time it was temperate and hanging out near the equator was about 200 million years ago, when the continents were all arranged differently. And that leaves us with the most mind-bending question of all. We assume intelligent life is a pretty recent thing in Earth's history. But what if it's not? Over 200 million years, any trace of a civilization would be completely erased by nature. Unless it was flash frozen and perfectly preserved under a continent-sized sheet of ice. The real secret of Antarctica might not be a myth we can debunk, but a possibility so ancient and so profound we haven't even figured out how to ask the right questions yet.